All systems go. Clear for liftoff.
What's going on, golf fans? It's your boy GS Luke here with our round 2 live stream for the Memorial. Going to get you ready for all of your lineups with a look at the weather report, some ownership and strategy heading into Friday. We'll talk how to build a player pool, some contest selection, even some lineup construction as well, and whatever questions you've got in the live chat for me too. So we got Ross down there who is killing it after round 1. Let's run it back for Friday, so let's get on after it. We got Alan as well, Steven, and GoCollect, all the regulars already saying hi. First off, hopefully you're having a fantastic Thursday, everyone, and you're ready to get after it for Friday. So if you don't have any questions, don't be shy. You can say hi in the live chat, but with anything that you're curious about, any sort of player deep dives later on, just let me know and we'll get to them when it's appropriate. But to start off the live stream, we're going to focus on course conditions and the weather, and then start to focus on actual players and whatnot. So we got C. Floyd, we got Nick Marsh here live. It's great to see you here in a live chat for once. What's going on, my man? We got Jason and Jordan as well. And yeah, good observation. Team Great Britain was going through it today. The people over there with their fish and chips lovers probably not feeling too great about it. But I've got to say, Fleetwood looked pretty good at one point today. So maybe they've got some fight back over the weekend. But we got Nicholas Jones down there, says, "What's up, brother? Thanks for all I do." I appreciate you guys, all of you viewers, everyone that supports the pieces of content that I'm doing throughout the industry. I just want to say thank you to all of you guys as well. So smash that like button if you guys haven't already, and let's hop on into this thing. So course conditions today were pretty flat between the first and second half, and it's not like we had defined waves. It was just continuous two-sums off of hole number 1. So you're not really ever going to get a massive disparity in that situation. And it was 0.17 shots between the morning and afternoon. And if you take a look at the disparity, it favored the second half of tee times. And frankly, I don't know if I'd look into it all that much. This could have easily been due to the difference in talent level from gap to gap, or could have just been variance, because Ben Griffin went off relatively early. You did have players like Colin Morikawa that were towards like the last third of tee times, but it was a pretty good mix towards the top here. So I personally didn't see a massive factor with the weather today, a massive impact, I should say, with the slate. And tomorrow, I think it's the same kind of thing, because if we take a look at the Friday forecast, we have the HRRR up here on windy.com. You can see that they're calling for almost the same exact scenario, but with a little bit of rain in the morning. And some forecasts, some models in the local area are calling for the possibility of some isolated thunderstorms in the afternoon, which I guess in theory could bring into play some sort of a delay. But at least if it ends up playing without a delay, I don't see any massive difference from round to round. And like I was mentioning before, because it is continuous two-sums off of hole number 1, it's not like we'd say, oh, only go out there and play your morning guys, or only play the guys that are in the PM wave. We don't have that same kind of situation. So if we're going to deep dive the weather and I guess try and give you a few angles to take, if you're trying to correlate some lineups and perhaps get an edge, if there ends up being one, is maybe the late morning guys are the best tee times to target, because, and I'm talking more so like the 9 to 11 o'clock time zone there. So like that 2-hour window, you can play most of your rounds without any sort of wind. Also, it's going to be a little bit higher temperatures by the late morning. And I think that's why the PM wave played a little bit easier today. The ball was traveling further. You were having a lot of issues in the morning if you weren't a long player off the tee. We had guys like Snedeker with 200-yard approach shots on like 6 of his first 9 holes, which isn't sustainable, especially for an older player like Snedeker that doesn't hit the ball quite as far as what he's used to. Tomorrow, though, it doesn't look like it's as cool in the morning. It's closer to about 60 degrees at tip-off rather than 50 degrees like you had today. So I don't think it's going to be a real big impact at all. I think the scoring average might even be a little bit flatter than round number 1. But if there was any sort of tee times that maybe get an advantage, it would be these like 9 to 11 o'clock guys, because they're going to finish play before that potential storm comes through. You can see the HRRR has it coming in around 3 p.m. I believe most of the models that I was looking at had it around 2 to 4 p.m., had that storm coming through. Those late morning guys, aren't going to really have to deal with that. And the reason why it's important to point this out, guys, is if we go to the NEM forecast, we take a look at Saturday, it looks dreadful. It looks windy as all hell. It's about 25 miles an hour sustained winds, or wind gusts, just to say 15 miles an hour sustained on Saturday morning. So if there happens to be a delay, which there's no way to predict this ahead of time, which is why I'm not really playing the weather, it would favor those guys in the morning for sure, because they'd be able to play all their rounds before that ends up becoming a thing. But it's what is it? Sketchy at best is probably the best way to put it. I was thinking of a better way. Questionable at best is probably the best way to put that kind of a weather edge. So I'm personally playing the slate very straight up. I think that in most scenarios, it's going to be like a 0.1, maybe a 0.2 shot difference at most between the two different waves. But I will say that if there is a side to go out there and stack in like 10, 20% of your portfolio, it would be those late morning guys. So just wanted to throw that out there. It's not something that I'm personally going to be taking advantage of. And just to give you an idea of who some of those players would be, you know, your Pavons around 840, Max Home was going off in that group. But all these guys that you see on the screen right now, in theory, would be the guys you'd want to target if you're going with that kind of a stack. And, you know, you could push it out a few groups in either direction. So you could go past a little bit past 11 a.m. local, maybe even to like 11, 11:20. Vice versa, right? Maybe you even push it forward a bit and take all the rest of the morning guys as well. Maybe not ideal conditions because it'll be damper. Also, courses can play a little bit longer with the fact that it won't be as warm at 8 a.m. So that's why I was pushing back that tee time wave just a little bit. But maybe you make your cutoff 10:30 a.m. and you take everyone out before that. I think there's a bunch of different ways you could approach this kind of slate. But again, full transparency for my part, guys, it's not something that I'm doing myself. I just like to kind of spitball at times, right? Give you guys, you know, a few ideas when it comes to building your lineups, because not anyone has the perfect process, right? There's obviously times where I don't get the weather right, and that happens to everyone out there that is building showdown lineups. But you should be thinking about a lot of these scenarios ahead of time. And I think really when you make a mistake when it comes to playing PGA DFS in the weather is when you don't do your research at all, and you at least didn't consider, right, some of these outside situations. Because if you're somebody that's looking at the weather and doesn't realize that a delay is possible tomorrow afternoon, then you could get completely blindsided if, you know, for example, you see this like 0.17 shot advantage, for example, and you go, oh, I really want to play the PM guys because I want to take the side that played easier in round number one. Imagine if you get delayed the next day and you don't do the proper deep dive with the weather, and then you end up getting screwed on Saturday morning with like 15-mile-an-hour winds. So again, nothing that you can really rely on. It is sketchy for sure, but that is the side I would lean if you decide to do anything with the weather. But what we're going to do next is I'm going to bring up my projections, which I do already have up on my Patreon page. But what we're going to focus on here together is the top owned plays. And we have all the guys that are, the top 11 highest owned players on the slate. So it was everyone that was over 13% that I threw in this little collection here. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through the top end of this list to show you some of the ticking time bombs when it comes to the game theory, perhaps players that you might want to think about twice before playing. I know my guy DJN75 used to have like his donkey chalk list. This will be like a little homage to him, I guess, right? Going through some of the top owned guys on the slate. And it's not, and like he always said as well, right? It's not like you have to fade guys because they're super highly owned, but it takes away from their utility, especially when you're playing showdown in rounds 2 and 3, when you have no placement points in play, and especially round 2 when we've only seen 18 holes this week. That is nothing. That is a quarter of an NFL showdown slate. It's like after the first quarter going and completely changing your builds because the first quarter was rushing heavy in a game. And, you know, we've seen it completely flip at different spots during NFL games. And if you've been following the PGA Tour, I mean, you know the volatility from round to round out here on the PGA Tour as well. So that's why you could really make an argument for fading a lot of these players, because most of these guys, what you'll notice here on the left side, are players that are under par so far. And there might be a few exceptions like a Tommy Fleetwood, a Patrick Cantlay, even a Xander Schauffele at +1 that are towards the top here. But if they're not under par and in the top 5, top 10 right now, they're in the top 20 up there at even par or better. So we'll go through this list here in a second, but I do want to catch up on any specific questions that people may have had on the weather before. So where are we at? What's going on, Joseph? JT shooting the course record after that performance. He might, man, right? He did that at the Players, that's for sure. What's going on, Mike H? Aaron Rychalk was a big swing and a miss. Yeah, for sure. A lot of people that played him aren't very happy. And same thing with Daniel Berger, right? Daniel Berger was super high owned and he shot +9 today. So there were a few chalk bombs, and I'm pretty happy to see a lot of that happen because, I mean, you guys know me, right? I'm always trying to fade as much chalk as possible. There are a few guys I played that aren't in great situations, but at least it's not like a 20% of Daniel Berger that I'm playing. That sucks. So it's you're always gonna hit some, you're gonna miss some for sure, but those chalky guys missing usually makes me pretty happy. What's going on, David? He said, so nice to be live. Smash the like button. You heard the man. Get to it, guys. What's going on, Ed? Said, hey, Luke, thanks for the live. It's good that you can make it for a change. My bad there. I completely butchered that, but I got you, Ed. What's going on, man? What's going on? Blake, you said JJ Swan, Poston, and Fitz are going to miss the cut. Sucks to hear that for you, man, but there's going to be a lot of guys that miss the cut. And frankly, I don't know about that with those three guys. Spawn is within the cut line right now. I know Poston's one outside the cut line, and I'm not exactly sure where Fitz is, but I don't know if you know the cut line rule this week, if you're saying that sort of thing. But hey, best of luck to you, man. I hope it goes better for you. What's going on, Ross? Is there a chance to get preferred lies? I don't think so. It's supposed to rain like 0.1 inches tomorrow. So who knows? Maybe the forecast that they're looking at is calling for more rain and they take a precautionary approach. But they didn't play it today. And I think tomorrow, right, they're probably going to stick to that same sort of thing. So we'll have to wait on the word from the tour to see what they officially decide. But I would take a guess and say that they don't. You see Mount Vernon on the map. That's where you live. Love the memorial. Yeah, I'm from Pittsburgh originally, so not that far from Columbus. So love the Northeastern stuff. What's going on? Joseph said Murfield is a heavenly track. I agree with you, man. It's, by the way, I've never played there before, but one of these days it's on my bucket list to get out there and just see how tough that track can be. He said, maybe this is a dumb question, but Decky is negative off the tee and on approach, but positive tee to green. Is there anything to take from this? Yeah, it means that he gained a bunch around the green, right? Tee to green is off the tee approach and around the green together. So if he's negative in those two and he's gaining in general, well, there's only one answer to that question. So there's nothing to take away from that other than he chipped the ball well. What's going on, Nick? Not going to lie, he wasn't able to catch a shot today. That was the main factor. What was the main factor for the scores? It's Muirfield Village, brother. It's a course that played 1.6 over par last year. Playing 2 strokes over par is not surprising in the least. So it's just a hard track. So remind yourself, by the way, guys, like, you know I was giving Blake a little shit before because I was like, dude, your guys are within the cut line. Like, what are you saying? It played like 3 strokes over par today, 2 strokes over par for a scoring average. The current cut line is +4 for goodness sake. So, most times the cut line after round 1 is like -1, -2. Like, remind yourself of that sometimes, right? Like your guys at +3, +4, it's almost like -1, -2 in any other tour event. So it's just Muirfield Village, man. And it's not going to get any easier this weekend. The winds are going to kick up on Saturday. It's going to be super tough Sunday. They always make it like the toughest test on tour at the Memorial on Sundays. Tomorrow, I think, is the day to go low. Pins today were really tough. Tomorrow they might soften them up just a little bit. But dude, Saturday, Sundays are going to be even more brutal than today. So I would say get used to it. It's going to only get worse. What's going on? He said Max Homa is in rare form. Yeah, dude, I've got to say, he's looking like he's quote unquote back, as some people would say, but he has to put it together for an entire event for me to be truly convinced. He's showing us flashes of brilliance, but he's yet to go out there and really keep it together for more than 2-3 rounds. Nick Dunlap wasn't a dumpster fire today. Maybe it's the time to play him at the min price. I'm not against it. I didn't get there myself, Alan, but he is showing some kind of signs. And we're going to go through the shots gained metrics here in a few minutes. And I want to look at his off the tee play because, I mean, that's what's been destroying him. And if he gained off the tee today, then yeah, he might be a spot to get to. Wait till I see who's number 1 on approach. Oh, I already know, man. I've already made my player poll. I've already done all my projections, Ross. So trust me, we'll go through it though for sure. It's I mean, you know who it is. We won't spoil it. What's going on? Run the bases. You said Muirfield is so special. Your favorite course? Can't contend that at all. It's like Augusta National mixed with Torrey Pines. That's, I think, the best way to describe it. Like off the tee, it's like Torrey Pines. The greens are like the Masters. It's a little bit easier than both those courses. Like the greens aren't as bad as Augusta. It's not as hard of a test as Torrey Pines off the tee, but it's pretty damn close. in both cases. So like you said, it's a special golf course. But let's go through this ownership. So what you can see towards the top here, it's most of the guys at the top end of the leaderboard that are getting that kind of steam. But the kind of players that I think you should really worry about with the ownership are your guys in the 6 and 7K range. And there's not a ton of them that are towards the top end of the ownership, but a few notable players like a Ben Griffin at $7,800 being at 18.5% ownership is like the donkey chalk of all donkey chalk if you're looking at a round 2 showdown slate. So like you won't see me ever playing a guy like Ben Griffin for round 2. Not to say that they don't get there. Like we've had guys that have run the table rounds 1 and 2 and had like 5 strokes leads, heading into the weekend, but they're extremely rare. And for that reason, because more often than not, they don't end up getting there in back-to-back days, I try and fade a lot of those kind of a players. So Ben Griffin would be an example of that sort of guy. And Andrew Novak is also 13.5% owned in the 7K range. And Akshay Bhatia, a little bit over 13% in that 7K range, which I know compared to these other like 8, 9, and 10K guys, it doesn't look that drastic. Just remind yourself, these are the top 11 highest owned players in my projections for round number 2. Like compared to the other 7K guys, a Novak, a Bhatia, they're 3, 4, sometimes even 5, 6 times higher owned than their peers around them. And, Ben Griffin's even more so chalk compared to some of the other guys at the top end of the 7K range. That's why those kind of players, more often than not, like 70 to 80, 90% of the time are going to be players that I'm excluding from my player pool. But it's also worth noting that of the like 9 and 10K guys that we have towards the top here, that there's a handful that I am playing that are towards the top end of ownership. So it's not to say that these high owned guys are players that you can't use in your lineups. It's just that if you're going to, you have to keep in mind that they are carrying that kind of steam, because depending on the contest you're entering, if it's a cash or a smaller field single entry, then maybe it's not the biggest deal. But if you're playing in a contest that has over 1,000 entries, the large field GPPs that have 5 to 10,000 plus entries in most cases, then it becomes a real problem if your guys are 20 to 25%. And I mean, you can see all the candidates on this list here that are getting that ownership are the guys that played well today. And just as I mentioned before, remind yourselves as well that golf is an extremely variant sport and that we've only seen 18 holes. And I know I used like the NFL showdown comparison to maybe give you guys some perspective, but it's true. We've only seen 1 out of the 4 rounds. So if you're using the shots gained metrics from today like it's the absolute gospel, then you're doing it wrong. You're not approaching the slate the right way. So we are going to go through the shots gained metrics. We're going to talk about how to build a player pool. But the reason why I wanted to go through the ownership before we do so is that this factor, the game theory, trying to get different to the rest of the field, is the most important thing that we have for tomorrow's slate. Weather can sometimes trump ownership at times, especially when it looks like it's going to be a massive advantage. I don't see that for round number 2. In this kind of scenario, though, where we don't have a weather edge, it's all about the game theory. And, you can use the shots gained metrics. You can find some ball striking poppers, short game regression candidates, course history guys, high upside players to throw into your lineups. But if they're low owned, then that makes them great plays. If they're high owned and they have those things going for them, then you might have to think twice before using them in your lineups. And just to give you that perspective of these top level players, I think there's 4, maybe even 5 of these 11 guys that I'm using in lineups. So like there are a few of them. I think it's 4 of the 11 that I'm using in my 150 max pool. If you're only playing a handful of lineups, so let's say like 3 to 20, not 150, like somebody like myself, you might only want to play 2, maybe 3 at most of these top 11 players. And, you don't have to be overly contrarian about it. If you wanted to, you could fade all 11 of these players and really take that kind of a stand. But that'd probably be overdoing it a bit. So I would say, pick your stands up top, have conviction plays, because of these top level players, by the way, some of them have really, really good stat profiles heading into round 2. So, there's a few that you might be able to squeeze in there, but just keep that in mind that they're the highest owned players on the slate. And, just past this 13% mark, you start to see more of those like 7, 8K guys sneaking in there. It gets extremely important to fade that chalk the further down the board that you go. And I know we don't have any like 6K guys up here, but there are a few 6K players that are close to 10, even a little bit over 10% ownership for round number 2 that are like automatic fades for me, because, the 7K guys are borderline in a few cases. Like there might be one guy, like chalky guy in the 7K range that you see in my player pool for round number 2. 6K range, though, it'll be 0. Like there's just no chance in hell that on a single round slate like you have for tomorrow, that I'm going to play a chalky 6K guy in Showdown. That's like the biggest cardinal sin that you could possibly make when building lineups. So up top, you can have your standard two, but down low, I'd recommend getting as different as you possibly can, because they're all slapdicks. They're all guys that don't project that well to begin with. So if you're going to have to play them in 25, 30% of your lineups to get that leverage, that's most likely not the best idea, because there's a reason why they're in the 6K range. There's a reason why they're towards the bottom end of the pricing. If they were a half good player, a consistent guy that you saw showing up reliably on tour, they wouldn't be a $6,200 golfer. I mean, that's just the fact of the matter here, right? There's no one on the slate that is that mispriced at this point that you'd have to play them in the 6K range, even if they're 10% owned. So that's why having projections like I have on my Patreon page, or of course on the SHIPIT Nation website, which is of course the site that we're on here, the best in the industry for my money, especially when it comes to covering all the different sports out there. It's why having a website where you can rely on those ownership projections is so important, because that's where the big edge comes when you're playing in round 2 and 3 Showdown, because of the variance that's involved here. But now that we moved on from the ownership, we're going to go through some player pool stuff. So if there's anyone that you want me to deep dive and go through the shots gained metrics on, feel free to go ahead and let me know. After we go through a few of the categories I want to point out here is when we're going to do some of those deep dives. So let me actually refresh this, just make sure that all the shots gained metrics are exactly up to date after Nick Taylor and his partner finished that last hole. And we'll get rolling on some of those player deep dives. So where I like to start on these slates is shots gained ball striking. And you can see the number one shots gained approach player. Oh, it was Colin Morikawa before. It was my guy. But shots gained ball striking, it's still Colin Morikawa at number one on that list. So I bet him outright this week is one of my core plays and whatnot. The shots gained profile is about as consistent as you could possibly want, but he's going to be mega chalky in round 2 Showdown. So, just like a Shane Lowry here as well, he's at T4. He was relatively popular heading into the main slate too. This stat profile is fantastic. I mean, he's a great course fit. There's just, it almost looks like all positives when it comes to trying to play this guy, other than the game theory component with both of these sort of a players. So if you're going to use a Colin Morikawa, a Shane Lowry, do so knowing that you're going to have to get different elsewhere in your lineup. And I'll say that out of those top 2 players that I'm playing at least one of them in my lineups. Bud Cauley had a really good stat profile heading into round 2. And the reason why we're starting with the shots gained ball striking here is that combines your off the tee and approach stats. That's what shots gained ball striking is. It's just a combination of those 2 categories. Players that gain in the ball striking categories can normally continue that from round to round. And I actually know we had the question from Steven before about like tee to green stats. I think tee to green stats are useless. Like there are a few courses, I guess, where like putting doesn't matter, and you could use shots gained tee to green as like kind of a shortcut to get to those other 3 stat categories. But the category that you really want to hone in on would be the ball striking categories, which, like I said, are off the tee plus approach together, because your golf swing, how you're hitting the golf ball, is by far the most consistent part of golf from round to round. In fact, I am a testament to this myself, because over the last few months, I've been striping the ball. And in fact, over the last few rounds, I've added like 5 to even 10 yards distance to my clubs. And it's been a positive momentum for like the last 2-3 months for me. And you can kind of feel that with your golf swing. You don't have to think about it as much when you're starting to get into that kind of a groove. These tour players have that same kind of stuff happen. And, if you play a lot of golf yourself, you probably know what I'm talking about. You can get into ruts as well. There are times when the ball striking isn't going your way. And, Sahith Theegala has kind of fell into that this year. Max Homa, for example, right? He fell into a rut with that ball striking for 4 or 5 months even at some point last year. He's starting to finally come out of it looks like, for Max Homa. That's why the ball striking categories are so important to look at, and why also the short game categories. So short game, shots gained short game, that is shots gained around the green plus shots gained putting. So the other 2 categories we have, that's the more variant part of golf, because there's a lot of luck involved when it comes to holding putts, holding chips especially. A lot of that is almost just pure luck when it comes to shots gained around the green. And especially on the greens too, you'll hear players all the time talk about how they were hitting good putts, they were setting themselves up in perfect positions for their entire round, and they just couldn't get anything out of it. They couldn't make any of those birdie putts, those 5 to 10 footers that are close to 50-50s in a lot of cases. I mean, if you're making the 50-50s, you're gaining 2 to 3 shots gained putting. I mean, that's like an extra 4 birdies right there that you could potentially be making, which is in a lot of cases down to the luck of the draw, because part of the reason reason for it, by the way. It's not just the fact that putting is more fickle. It's a little bit more touch-based. That's why there's more variance to it. But it has to do with the golf course itself. You have bumps on the greens. As the day goes on, there's more bumps. That's another factor why sometimes the morning wave will play a little bit easier than the afternoon, is because there's not as many bumps on the surface. But even when they have a perfectly manicured surface at like 7:50 in the morning, you're not going to get a perfect roll every single time. These courses that the tour players are using are better than most at doing so. Your local munis, the courses that a lot of us play on, us mere mortals that are playing golf, have even more variance when it comes to actually making putts. But even the best courses in the world, Augusta National, etc., you still get that sort of an aspect to it. So that's why these categories, you don't ignore them, right? It's not like it's a data point that you completely throw out. It's just that when we go over here to the shots gained putting category and we take a look at the top end of the list, I wouldn't count on these guys to be gaining 2-3 shots gained putting for the entire event. And there are always exceptions to the rule. They're very notable when they happen. So for example, Matty Schmid, that was an insane putting performance, him going out there for 3 of the 4 days and gaining all those strokes putting. But what happened on Sunday, right? He fell off a bit like you'd expect for Schmid. And in fact, if we take a look at Matty Schmid today, you'll see even more of that regression happening. He lost both around the green and with the putter. It wasn't even just the putter last time out, by the way. It was also the around the green that he was gaining with in almost every single round. It comes around real quickly with the around the green and the putting compared to what you have with your golf swing. So that's why we treat these categories a little bit differently. So for example, these guys towards the top of both the putting and the around the green list are guys that I kind of hold it against a little bit. It's a massive red flag to see that. So for example, Ben Griffin, he gained like 6 stroke short game. Like I do not see that happening very often. A Nick Taylor gaining over nearly 4.5 strokes short game. That's not going to happen a lot of rounds out there. Novak gained nearly 3 stroke short game. Same thing with Siwoo Kim and Siwoo, right? Especially with the putter. He's not used to gaining 2 strokes out there per round. These sort of guys, it's not like they're unusable, but especially if they're chalky. So like a Novak, a Siwoo, a Nick Taylor, a Ben Griffin, you're not going to see me playing those guys. Also include a Max Homa in that same sort of thing. He gained about 2.5 strokes between the short game categories. You're going to see me playing the guys that are a little bit more ball striking heavy. So let's look at the top end of the around the green list. These guys also probably due for some regression. So Tony Finau, he chipped in a little bit more than you'd like to see. Mackenzie Hughes, Hideki Matsuyama. And yeah, so this is the stat profile, by the way, right? We had the question about him losing ball striking, but gaining tee to green. It's because he gained a bunch of strokes around the green. So this is not the best stat profile. In fact, this would probably be like a 3.5, a 4 out of 10, because he's losing in the 2 most important categories. And the only part of his game that was remotely good was him trying to save par when he was out of position. I will say, though, I am playing Hideki Matsuyama in my round 2 lineups because there's always the or he could factor. And the thing that I think makes Hideki Matsuyama a good bounce back candidate is that he shot about the field average, +2. That's nothing to be ashamed of. He's a player that's played extremely well here before. He's a winner at Muirfield Village. He has a bunch of top 5, top 10s as well when he hasn't won around this kind of a golf course. And he's been volatile this year. He's had some down weeks. He's had some down rounds. And he's had some events where he's looked lights out, literally unbeatable the first event of this year, for example. So Matsuyama at T31, he's a player that I would use as a high upside player because of the kind of results that he's had here. You can also say that he's like a course history guy that I'd be using, but the stat profile, not the reason for getting to that sort of a play. And, if you're going to take a chance on one of these guys that maybe got lucky around the green, you have to have a reasoning for wanting to do it, right? Like, for example, if Hideki had never played here before and he had no good course history, there's little to no chance I'd probably play him tomorrow. Like you'd have to have some extra reason to overcome that kind of a stat profile. And in some cases you can find that. In most cases, you probably won't be able to overcome that on a lot of the players that you're going through. So the other thing to also mention with the shots gained metrics, and it's why I think Hideki Matsuyama is still perfectly playable for round number 2, is we've only had 18 holes at this point. So while it's nice to find some of these ball striking poppers like we have here in the top 5, top 10, they're going to be steamed up. You're not going to be the only one, first of all, that's looking at the ball striking list and trying to find some of these guys to feed into your lineups, but you're going to be sharing them because of that with maybe an extra 2 to 5% of the field. So it's not to say that it has to be like exactly what you're looking for. In fact, my favorite thing to do with this ball striking list is just to go a little bit further down. So like, these top level guys, sure, they played the best golf today, but they're also going to be the chalk. But if we go down just a little bit further to these guys that gained closer to like 2.5 strokes ball striking, like a Patrick Cantlay is not going to be as steamed up as some of the other 9K players are. And Eric Cole, he's going to be higher owned than most in the 6K range, but he's not going to be like 10 to 12% owned. I've got him closer to about 7% ownership for your round 2 showdown. So that's pretty doable at that kind of number. But if you continue to go down the list here, like these guys closer to 1.5, 1 to 2 shots gained range in this entire like window that we're seeing here are all playable in my opinion as well. And the aspect that I think makes them better plays for round 2 is that they're not going to get that extra 2 to 5% ownership. So whether it's shots gained ball striking, you can look at regular shots gained approach if you would like as well. Harry Higgs, by the way, look at that. My guy, the good old big rig, had himself an iron day today. I don't know if I'd count on it multiple days in a row, but if we can get him through the cut line, could be a moving day play if he falls off a little bit tomorrow, especially if he can keep up that kind of iron play. But the putting regression probably going to come for my guy. He's a lot of fun to watch, but a lot better than I thought he'd do for round number 1. In fact, I know one of my buddies took him for like the over +1, thought he'd shoot like +2, +3 or worse, which I couldn't blame him for taking with the +2 scoring average, but geez Louise, he hit his irons well. So I didn't play Harry Higgs myself, but the kind of guy that you could consider adding to a few lineups. And actually, let me make sure I'm not putting out some fake news with the Harry Higgs stuff there. So 1 second. Because there's a chance that I just overlooked that, and he's actually in my player pool. So just give me 10 seconds while I bring up my sheet and confirm that. He's not in my player pool, just like I thought for tomorrow. But I mean, with that 3.5 shots gained approach, I couldn't blame you for taking that approach yourself. Let's catch up on chat, see what's going on with you guys, and then we're going to talk about some lineup construction and stuff as well. So where we leave off, so we had the Nick Dunlap comments. It looks like -7 realistically might be winning this thing. Pars and hold feel like the next few days. I think especially with the weekend forecast that we have right now, that I think you're right. And that's not too far off what we normally have at this golf tournament. Something close to 10 under par is about the sweet spot for the Memorial. And considering that it's already playing 2 over par, like I think maybe even worse than that could take this home, like a -4 or -5. A lot of that's going to depend on Scotty Scheffler. It's going to depend on your Morikawas, how they play over the next few days. I hate to point out Ben Griffin and like talk crap about him, but like I don't see him shooting even par the next 3 days. Like he's probably going to shoot a couple over par, you'd think, at the best over the next 3 rounds. We'll see how it shakes out. I think it'll be fun either way. So Grazeman has to have amounts of bounce back, asking for an overexposed friend. Oh, sucks to hear that you're overexposed because I know he shot like +6 today or something. But yeah, I think he's a good bounce back candidate. I'm using him in my round 2 showdown lineup. So I hope he does have that bounce back. I have him in some main slate exposure as well, as we touched on yesterday. But 4 shots gained lost putting feels like something that has to turn around, because if you guys have seen Max Grazeman's stats on bent grass, we do have bent grass greens this week. He gains 0.9 shots gained putting per round. So this round today wasn't just 4 strokes into the negative. It was 5 strokes below his baseline on the surface. So I think that that is enough to just use him as a GPP flyer. I don't know if we could count on it though, because that regression doesn't always happen, but is he going to putt better than that -4? For sure. Like he's not going to lose 4 shots gained putting very often, especially on this type of grass. Let's see. You said Poston left the putter at home. Yep, probably did. Let's see. Let's look at the stats to see if they back that up. I think they do. Yeah, he lost 3.4 shots gained putting. That's not going to happen very often. And I'm playing him as a bounce back candidate. And like Razorman's the same kind of way. Like he lost almost 4 shots gained putting. Those guys that are elite tier putters that do that are players that I'll use all day in Showdown. Now, if that was like a John Rahm, a player, I guess John Rahm's maybe not the best example. Let's go old Scotty Scheffler. Let's go Scotty from 3 years ago, right? That's allergic to making putts. Do we think he's going to bounce back from losing all those strokes? Maybe not so much in 2021, but now, right, a Scotty Scheffler that's a top 15 putter on the PGA Tour, you probably would think he'd turn it around after having that sort of a day. So it kind of depends on the player that you're looking at and their stats on the greens for the year. Connors and Pendrith deep dive. Let's do it. So Connors, I know, had a decent stat profile. He gained off the tee, gained a little bit on approach, but was about a neutral in the short game categories. this is a 6 out of 10 right here in terms of stat profile. It's not anything that overly wows you. 1.4 shots gained to ball striking it's solid, but it's not 2.5 to 4 shots gained like you had for some other players. But the beauty of that, and it's like one of those guys where you scroll down the ball striking list a little bit and you find that lower ownership, it's going to be a much sneakier play than some of the other 9K guys. So I like the ownership component. He's more of like a GPP play for me. I prefer some of the other guys around him if I'm going in a single entry. Like, for example, Patrick Cantlay is somebody that I'd rather have in a single entry lineup. Cantlay had really good approach day, also gained off the tee as well. But Patrick Cantlay had a lot more putting regression due. I mean, he's one of the best putters at this golf course of all time. He averages like 1.5 shots gained putting per round at Muirfield Village. He obviously has won here before. He's had a ton of success outside of his wins around a Muirfield Village. I'd prefer to go with Cantlay as he just projects a little bit better, but a Connors in a GPP format where it's not about projection as much, that ownership, right, getting different to the field matters a little bit more. That's where I might go with a guy like a Corey Connors. But I think both are excellent plays, both in my player pool. And who was the other one? Pendrith you wanted me to go through? Let's see. I don't know that one off the top of my head. He did lose about 2 strokes putting. He gained 2 strokes on approach. This is a good short game regression candidate. The 0.8 strokes around the green, that's not really that much of a factor either direction. I do want him to be better off the tee. He hit 64% of his fairway. So I'm guessing he had a penalty shot at some point. That's why he was into the negative there. Let's double check on that. Maybe not. We'd have to see his actual scorecard on these bogeys to see if any of them were water balls. But if he cleans up the off the tee play, he's normally gaining a half a stroke to a stroke in that category, is even just a neutral with the putter. I like what you're doing with Taylor Pendrith. So yeah, I think a sneaky good play for tomorrow, I'd say, in both of those. He said Fleetwood looks like a slam dunk. His approach was incredible outside of losing 2 on 15. So yeah, good call. These guys that hit water balls, hole 12 was one today where you saw a lot of people in the water losing 2.5 strokes to the field. Yeah, especially, I mean, that hole alone probably took away at least 1.5 strokes on approach, and he still gained 1.6 in that category. I tend to agree with you there. I mean, he's got good course history around here. The issue with a Fleetwood, though, and it's not a massive issue, but it's at least worth pointing out, is that he is going to get some ownership. I've got him as one of the more popular plays towards the top end of the board. I know we pointed that out before. So if you're going to use him, just like a Morikawa, just like some of the other guys that are getting ownership in that 9-10K range, you just have to keep that in mind when you're going through your builds. And I have plenty of those guys in lineups. I just always give that little bit of an asterisk so that everyone knows when they're building. Deep dive on Cole and Fox. So, okay, let's do it real quick. Eric Cole first, my guy from down here in my area in Florida. He gained 2.6 strokes on approach, but lost with the putter, just like Pendrith. I mean, it's the same exact stat profile pretty much, where he gained a lot on approach, just needs to be a little cleaner off the tee. Yeah, it's a 6.5 out of 10, even a 7 out of 10 stat profile. And then who was the other one? It was Eric Cole and Ryan Fox, who I love Ryan Fox this week. I thought he was a good low-owned pivot that you could take in the 6K range. He gained on approach. He was about a neutral. He gained a stroke short game today. Also needs to clean it up off the tee. So yeah, the off the tee is a huge part of all these players' games, especially the last 3 that we've gone through. They've, kind of held them back. And I've got to say, like a Ryan Fox, a Taylor Pendrith losing strokes off the tee is not going to happen very often. So it is a slight red flag because your swing can be pretty consistent from round to round. But I will say that a Fox, a Pendrith normally drive it a lot better than we saw today. So if anyone's going to bounce back overnight, kind of figure it out on the range and then take it to the golf course tomorrow, I'd much rather have a Ryan Fox and a Pendrith versus, a Snedeker or Matt Kuchar, for example, that's losing off the tee. They're not going to figure it out. Like there's a reason why they're losing strokes off the tee. A Fox, a Pendrith, they've just got to hit more fairways, it seems, to be able to go out there and pull that off. So yeah, I'd say probably closer to like a 5.5, a 6 out of 10 with this stat profile, just because the off the tee play was a little bit worse compared to those other 2 players, but still a better than average stat profile, especially for a guy that I think, or at least I have an affinity for at this kind of golf course. Not sure what the ownership percentage would look like since he's only 6.8K, but Pavone is kind of interesting. Yeah, low ownership. I'll tell you that much. He's, I believe, sub 5% in my projections. And you're spot on. I mean, the stat profile is exactly what you're looking for. A player that is due for some short game regression. I mean, losing nearly 3 strokes in those 2 categories is something that's not going to happen that often. The one thing I'll say about Pavone is that he is a little conservative for my liking. If you take a look at the birdie or better percentage list this year, he's like number 160 something, maybe even like number 170 something on tour when it comes to posting birdies or better. That is an issue for Showdown for me, just because it is so tied to the actual amount of birdies that you're making. I mean, DraftKings scoring, if you take a look at how it's broken down for Showdown, it's all about the birdies and streaks that you make. I mean, bogeys are actually okay in this kind of format, especially if you're making like 5-6 birdies in that round. So I'd say he's a 6.5, maybe even a 7 out of 10. Just let's hope he has an aggressive round, right? Like if you're going to use him in your lineups, you're going to have to hope he pin hunts a little bit more than usual. How are we feeling about Fox and Mac? So Fox, 5.5, 6 out of 10. We just went through that one, but let's go through Bobby Mack for you as well. So McIntyre, he played really well today. He shot -1. One of the few PM guys that you saw really ball striking it well. He gained 2.5 strokes ball striking, did gain strokes with the putter. But this has to be like a 6.5, a 7 out of 10 with the stat profile, because the 2 most important categories that we're looking for in these players, he gained those 2.5 strokes, and the short game, he did lose around the green to kind of offset that putter there. It's not like he carried himself in that category. So yeah, McIntyre, I've got a pretty positive sentiment on, I'd say. The unfortunate part though, is that because he shot under par and because he had such a good round today, is not going to be the only one that's playing him. So keep in mind that he'll be a little bit higher owned than the guys around him. Master 2 Gloves killed most of your lineups. Master 2 Gloves. Don't know why you're calling him Master if he screwed your lineups, but I respect the lack of vitriol that you have for Mr. 2 Gloves, but he might turn it around for you tomorrow. I wouldn't count out your lineups quite yet. He said, possible Poston finds the putter. Yeah, for sure. My mouth is getting real dry. Sorry about that. But yes, he could for sure find the putter. Those guys like Grazeman, same thing. Is he guaranteed to gain a bunch of strokes putting? No. But would it surprise me in the least if he gained 3.5 strokes putting? Not at all. Especially like a guy like Poston that's known as a good putter. Grazeman, same thing. We went through a few other examples on that board too. As long as they're not a crappy putter heading in, I always give those guys a chance to bounce back. If you're Tony Finau's, your old Scotty Schefflers, maybe not so much. Yeah, birdie or better percentage, by the way, let's just go ahead and bring that up. I always like to kind of give you guys a reminder of the birdie or better list when I can. So let's just go ahead and do that real quickly. It only takes like 30 seconds to a minute to do so. Birdie or better percentage. I know we talk about the shots gained metrics all the time when it comes to these players. I use course history to find a lot of my plays. I use high upside players, and this is where the high upside players come in. If you're looking for DraftKings scoring, you're trying to optimize on that kind of projection, this should be where you start your research if you're trying to find guys for bounce backs, because the shots gained metrics, they give us a really good sense for how people are playing right now, especially if you're trying to find like a conviction play. It helps you with trying to find your player pool when you're doing that. But if you're trying to find guys to like bounce back, then use the birdie or better list. And I guess it's worth noting out, Justin Thomas is number 1 in the world this year. So if you want a bounce back candidate for somebody that's going to be super low owned, Justin Thomas really, really looks like a good play for round 2, especially if you need to get wild with your 9-10K option. But except Straka, Morikawa, Scotty Scheffler, you're going to see towards the top end of that list. I'm going to point out a few players that kind of surprise with how high they are here. Like a Bhatia, a Rory, a Sanjay. No one's really going to be surprised by seeing those kind of guys. But a Cam Davis, a Matty Schmid, ranking a little bit higher than you might expect. Sam Burns hasn't even had a good year, and he's number 13 in the category. Didn't mean to click on him and bring him up, but let's keep going through it a bit. You've got Cantlay. I'm trying to find guys that are in the field that are maybe a little bit surprising that we could use, but there's Grazerman, right? And I know he didn't have the best round number 1, but if he finds a putter, he's normally making a whole bunch of whole bunch of birdies out there. Wyndham Clark at number 28 in that category. Davis Thompson at number 30. Of those players that we just pointed out, I mean, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. I believe I'm playing every single one of those guys that we just pointed out. So I guess I just pointed out a lot of my player pool, and I'm not talking about these like top guys, like these top 4. I'm not playing every single one of those, but like, especially like the Cam Davises, like your Schmids, like these sort of players down here. I think I'm playing all of them, but maybe one of those guys. in my lineups for round number 2. So if I'm going to, especially like a Davis Thompson, a Wyndham Clark, like they played absolutely terrible today, no one's going to use them. And if you're going to take a shot in the dark on a player, like there is much worse things to do than to take the guys that make the most birdies. Like if that's where the DraftKings scoring is being derived from, then why wouldn't you be taking a look at this birdie or better list? And I feel like when I say this, it like puts off a light bulb in people's minds. They're like, oh shit, maybe I should be considering the guys that are more aggressive in my lineups when it's only 18 holes that we're playing with. And by the way, that's why Scotty Scheffler is such a better play for main slate than what he is for Showdown. Not to say that he's a bad play for Showdown tomorrow. I'm using Scotty Scheffler in some of my round 2 Showdown lineups, but he's a better play for main slate because he's more of that like slow and steady kind of player. Like he has nuclear rounds from time to time, but it's usually him shooting like -3, -4 that you're seeing out there on tour. These guys like Wyndham Clark, Davis Thompson, I mean, the whole top end of the list that you see towards the top end of the birdie better list are guys that go nuclear at times. And sure, Scotty makes a whole lot of birdies himself, but he's only number 4 in the category. Like you would think he'd be number 1 with all the wins this year, especially the recent form over the last few weeks. Justin Thomas has been better this year in that category. So like, I think it's kind of humbling for guys like Scotty Scheffler when you look at this category, like even a Rory, fantastic stuff, having one of the best years. He's played some pretty hard events too. So that's part of the reason Rory might be a little bit lower there, but he makes less birdies per round than Harry Hall does. So like in a showdown format, guys like Harry Hall, I know he's not playing this week, are worth their weight in gold when it comes to using in lineup. So consider that aspect too. In terms of the contest selection, it looks pretty on par with what we've had for the last month or so. My favorite contest would be a lot of your single entries. So the big long drive is $25K. The issue is, and it's not a massive issue, is that it's a little more top heavy than I'd like though at a 5th to first place. So it is $5,000 of that $25K going to the winner, which does make for a good first place prize, but it does make it a little bit less sustainable for that top 5, top 10. This 5K long drive, so the slightly smaller contest, is also about 20% to first place. So it's not the best payout structure, but the drive the green is an 8th to first place. So I'm going to be 150 maxing this one for tomorrow, just because it's a little bit lower to first, right? It's not 20%. Whenever you have that slightly flatter payout structure, the rest of the top 5, the top 10 are a lot more respectable. So for example, if I'm entering $750 of lineups, like I will as a $5 150 max right here, if I finish anything in the top 6 pretty much, because I'm not going to only cash one lineup for $500, right? It'll be like probably at least I hope 25 to 30 lineups that I'm cashing out of my 150 at the very least for tomorrow. If I win this 500 and then have those other lineups cashing, I'm pretty much ensuring profit by having that top 10 finish, as opposed to other GPPs that are a little bit more top heavy, where maybe you only cash like a 7th or an 8th place finish, and you might end up negative on the day if they're only paying you like $200 with that less flat payout structure. So that's why the first place prize matters so much. And it's not just first, right? You got to look at second, third, but we kind of generalize it based on what you see with that first place prize. But these single entries, like this is the $200 driver. This one is also 20% to first place. These contests, even though they are a little top heavy, when you're only entering against like 55 to a couple hundred entries, it's so much easier to take down the top 5 or actually win one of those contests that a majority of you guys should be playing in those, because like I said, I'm 150 maxing this drive the green. So if you plan on entering like $50 of lineups, and you would take that $50 and enter 10 lineups in here, well, you've got 10 lineups versus my 150. And I promise you, I'm not the only one 150 maxing this kind of contest. You're going to have plenty of pros that know what the hell they're doing when they're entering their lineups that you're playing against with 15 times less lineups. So with that $50, what I would do, if that was my bankroll for that kind of a round, is I'd spread it out over 3 or 4 different single entries. So for example, and this is how I would do it personally, it doesn't have to be exactly what you choose to do, I'd enter this $33 dog leg. It's $33. It is slightly over half of my payout structure, but this would have to be my main lineup, right? Out of my $50 bankroll, I'd enter that. I'd enter a completely different lineup into this $12 albatross. So that puts us at $45. And then the last contest, I'd go with the $5 single entry, which they bury it on this list. It's going to be hard for me to find out. There it is, the 5K caddy, where it's also a really flat payout structure. By the way, those three single entries that we just went through are about 10 to 12% to first place. So even better than the big $100, $200 single entries that were closer to 20% to first place. When you have half of that going to first instead, right? Closer to that 10 to 12%. The rest of the top five is amazing. Like you finish in second, you're still winning $300. That is 60x your money. You would be thrilled about that in a $5 contest. You finish in third place, which, by the way, against 1,200 entries here, it's not easy to do that, but it is a realistic outcome. You win 40x your money for doing that sort of thing. That's why these contests are so much better. And like, even if it's a fifth place finish, let's not give you a top two, a top three. You're winning 20x your money if you finish in fifth place. Whereas if you take a look at some of those other contests, it may only be like 4 to 5x that you're winning for that kind of structure because they're giving all the money to the guy that finishes in first. And really, guys, and I like to point this out, not to like be a Debbie Downer or be like an asshole to certain people, but the people that play in like the big payout contests are like the people that aren't doing this for the right reason, right? It's the people that see 50,000 to first place, that see $10,000, $20,000 payout structures and go, ooh, I'm just going to go out there and go for that, right? And it's not really the reason you should be playing PGA DFS. If you want to do this long-term, keep it more sustainable, have a bankroll that you don't have to deposit every single week. It's important to enter the right kind of contest. So enter for the right reasons. Don't chase those massive payouts unless you're willing to take on that kind of variance. Because like I said, there's 150 maxers you're playing against. And let's be realistic, beating 7,000 people, let's see what it is in the drive the green. I think it was like 8,000 people. Let me find the exact number. Sorry, more than that. 9,500 entries, actually. They are entering in that sort of contest. It's much harder to beat those sort of builds than 200 entries in a single entry. So you just have to kind of keep that in mind when you're building your lineups. In terms of lineup construction, it's about making sure that we get enough differentiation into our lineups. So let's start over there. So up top, guys like Morikawa, more chalky players like a Lowry are going to be really tempting to want to get to. But the players that I like just a little bit more are the slightly sneakier options. So I know we mentioned Corey Connors as a potential play, but at slightly lower ownership and still setting up well stat-wise, like he's a pretty good starting point. Now, $9,200 might be a little bit too cheap as your first man in, but maybe you go like a Cantlay, then Corey Connors as your second man in. So maybe a little bit more of a balanced start to this lineup. You've got two guys that really set up well with the stats, but aren't going to be 20, 25% chalk. And you're not really getting different with these first two players, but at least you're not cornering yourself into a really high product ownership when you're moving on to your last four spots. It's going to be a lot more reasonable with these kind of players as opposed to going to guys that are like nine times higher end. And I guess this is a bad example with these 9K guys. It's guys that are like twice the ownership in some cases, but you get the idea. The guys that are the mega chalk on this kind of slate. Your next man in is where you want to kind of start to get different. So even with this kind of lineup where we didn't take like the super chalk towards the top, you want to avoid some of the really high-owned guys in the 8K range. So for example, Siwoo Kim has good course history. He also sets up well with the stats after round number one. I'd love to throw him in there, but he's going to be higher owned than some of his peers in this 8K range. So it might make a little bit more sense to maybe go to a Hideki Matsuyama instead, who Hideki we know is going to be a lot lower owned, probably maybe 4, even 5% lower owned than what you have with Siwoo Kim. And he's the better long-term player. He has just as good a course history as what you have with the Siwoo Kim. So sure, you're surrendering a little bit of form after round number one, but remind yourselves that it's only an 18-hole sample size of the most variant sport that we have when playing DFS. So let's throw Hideki in there as our next man in. We're still thinking about getting different. So like a Ben Griffin is just an absolute no-go. Even guys like a Harris English, a no-go because they're going to be higher owned than a lot of their peers. And I like Bud Cauley for tomorrow. His ball striking stats, he lost with the putter today. That's the exact kind of stat profile I'm looking for, but it's not the best idea if this is a large field GPP lineup. Now, if this was a single entry or even just like a smaller GPP, like a 2 to 3 max, a 20 max that only has like 500 to 1,000 entries that you're playing against, then go with Bud Cauley by all means. And heck, even in the 8K range, maybe you don't even force in Hideki in that kind of build. Maybe you do play your Siwoo, your Denny McCarthy that you want to throw into builds. I think Denny's a pretty decent bounce back candidate too. You get away with that in that single entry, but in the large field GPPs where you're entering against 10 to 20 times more entries, that's where it's important to start making these ownership decisions. So let's throw him in there. Rather than Cauley, we're going to use a Sam Burns because he's going to be a little bit lower owned. And in the large field GPPs, guys like Novak, Bhatia, who we pointed out like 13 to 14% ownership, I'd rather favor a player like an Alex Noren instead, who's going to be lower owned and projects just as good, if not better, than some of the other players around them. So they can't build a whole lineup together, even though this isn't necessarily a build I'll be using myself anyways, just because it's against the DraftKings terms of service. But hopefully it gives you guys a little bit of perspective into what you should be thinking about in your builds. And your last man in here, you could probably get away with using just about anyone as your last man in, just because there's not really any mega chalk at this $7,300 to $7,400 range. But if you really want to make sure that you're okay and not going to duplicate yourself and to get some added leverage, consider another pivot as your last man in. I honestly don't think you can go too overboard with your pivots in rounds 2 and 3 showdown. Not to say that you have to have all pivots, but if you have 5-6 pivots in the lineup, I don't think you have to shy away from that with how volatile showdown can be. But if you want to add even more on top of that, just taking another pivot to round it off, you could leave some salary on the table as well. So like, for example, if you went down here and you threw in like a Grazerman as your last man in, leaving $200 on the table and taking somebody that's going to be low owned because you shot +6, then, I mean, this lineup had virtually 0% chance of duplicating with anyone else. And you're still getting guys that project well across the board. And when your guys hit, let's say that you have a spike performance or two in this lineup, you're not going to be sharing them with 20-25% of the field and getting absolutely nothing out of it. It's something to consider, guys. And I don't think this is talked about enough when it comes to that game theory, especially when you start to get to like 20 to 25% ownership. That's how many lineups usually cash in large field GPPs. So, for example, if there's a guy that you absolutely have to have, let's say that he scores like 80 fantasy points tomorrow, which is completely unrealistic, just unrealistic in general for showdown. But let's assume that somehow somebody scores 80 points and you have to have him and have any chance to go out there and cash. If he's 25% owned, you literally have to have that guy to be able to cash, right? That's not the kind of scenario that you want to be in, where you have that guy, he hits, and the whole cash line are just guys with that lineup like that. I don't know. It's okay. You kind of want that guy to go off. Like, obviously hindsight after the fact, just like, oh, wow, I wish I would have played that guy. But even if you do, you've done nothing for yourself, right? You're still playing against all the guys that were going to cash anyways. It's just, trust me, when you're trying to find the lower owned players, it's always important in golf. Game theory is always the most important aspect when it comes to building fantasy golf lineups. That's for main slate. But when it comes to showdown, just 18 holes, multiply that by 2 or 3 times. Put it on steroids. Give it the Barry Bonds treatment for rounds 2 and 3 showdown without any placement points in play. You really want to embrace that even more where you can. So I'm going to go over any last second questions that you guys have for me in the live chat. But outside of that, that is all I've got for the round 2 live stream. Smash that like button if you guys haven't already. Also subscribe to the channel so you guys don't miss any of the content to come. Rounds 3 and 4, we're going to be doing the same thing for Saturday and Sunday. So make sure to stop on by for all of that content and for all your prop and betting needs for round 2. You guys can check out my live stream a little bit later on tonight. We're going to be breaking down all the underdog and prize pick stuff for Friday's action. Going to be going through stat averages, pin locations for tomorrow as well, all to get you ready for your exposure when it comes to prop betting. So underdog and prize picks people, sportsbook people that are betting matchups, that kind of thing on the sportsbooks, stop on by for that content as well. So it'll be at 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. So just a little bit over at half an hour from now. Any other questions you have for fantasy? So let's say they come up over the next, 10, 20 minutes and you guys want to ask them there on the prop live stream, feel free to go ahead and do so there as well. But that's all we've got here for this live stream. Going to touch on any of those last second questions. Best of luck. I want to see a lot of your names towards the top end of those GPPs tomorrow. Make sure to join up to my Patreon page, the SHIPIT Nation page as well, so you guys can get all the projections and content for Friday. Mine are already posted on my page. I know the guys at SHIPIT Nation, if it's not already up themselves, are already working hard at it themselves. The sweatiest of all try hard. So what you're going to find here on the SHIPIT Nation channel, whether it's all their stuff. I mean, they've got that long proven track record for quite some time. I think a lot of you guys are getting introduced to me throughout these live streams and probably learning to find a lot of that the same here. That's what we pride ourselves on, right? We work the hardest of anyone in the industry. We do all the showdown shows where all these other sites just kind of sit on their ass and don't do anything. If you guys want people that are actually locked into all these showdown slates, playing a bunch of volume themselves, are tuned into the trends, the meta at any given points when it comes to playing PGA DFS, and that's what you're getting here with the SHIPIT Nation crew and what I have to offer with my website as well. So if you haven't already joined up with the SHIPIT Nation crew or mine, I'd recommend doing that as soon as humanly possible. But outside of that, that's all for tonight's spiel. So let's see where we left off with any questions. Nick says Poston's normally a good putter, but he's been bad lately. Yeah, last few weeks, though, he's been great with the putter. So it's I guess it depends on the sample size, but for his career, Nick, he is a fantastic putter, one of the best that we have out there. You said Theegala and Hoagie, what did they look like? Theegala, he's coming back from injury, so I do at least want to mention that with him, but he lost off the tee and gained on approach, which I've seen worse stat profiles from it. +2 was really impressive considering where he came from. And then your guy, Tom Hoagie, I know you love playing Tom more than just about anyone else out there. He lost in the ball striking categories, which is not something that you can't overcome. But if you're going to use a Hoagie, even a Sahith Theegala, I kind of throw into the same kind of scenario here, it'd be at slightly lower ownership. I think with Sahith, you might get that low ownership. But because Tom Hoagie's T23, he's going to be average to maybe even slightly above the average ownership at that portion of the board. So their stat profiles for each one aren't the best, but it's not you can't condemn them either, right? Because just only 18 holes. He said, you're pretty new to Showdown. What do I make of guys whose shots gained cards are all over the place? Like a 5 out of 10, I'd say. Like, I don't really hold it against those guys or give them that much credit. Like, let's say that they gained off the tee, but they lost on approach, then like gained around the green and then lost with the putter. If it's like truly 50-50 like that, where it's like half and half on both sides, then I don't look at it as a positive or a negative. It's more like, is this guy a high upside player? Is he a good course history guy? If he's one of those two things and he's low owned, which you have to think if his shots gained are all over the place, he's probably decently low owned. He's at least not chalk at that portion of the board. Then yeah, you could use those kind of players, but it's not really a good or a bad thing, I'd say. He said Morikawa, the cut is back. He was throwing absolute darts. Oh, so you're saying that his cut ball flight's back? That's massive, man. And I didn't get to see a lot of his round. I was running some errands while he was throwing darts, but you best know that I was following that shot tracker. And I think what you said is spot on. I mean, the shots gained back it up, and it looks like he's going to go off. Was Sibu ripping darts? I didn't see, but probably not. He at least said when he smoked the cigarette a few weeks ago that it was like a one-off thing, but I don't know if I believe him with the whole Advil PM and Red Bull thing. He seems like a wild card. Who do I got winning after today? I'm still going to stick by Colin Morikawa. You know, he was the lowest odds guy that I took this week at 15-1. I know people out there probably got better numbers on Colin, but I'm stuck with Hard Rock Bet. So it just is what it is when it comes to the 15-1. I'll stick with my gut on that, right? I won't change my opinion, especially with his position at this point. Scotty Scheffler, though, lurking, he's going to be a tough one to beat. So probably one of those two, I'd say. Fowler's been riding hot in round 2. If he could play 4 round 2s, he'd be golden. I mean, he played really well today as well. So if you're saying he's going to build on that tomorrow, he could be towards the lead heading into Saturday. That'd be kind of cool to see again. 6 birds for Ricky today, too. 100% agree. And yeah, best of luck, everyone. Like I said, any other questions that you weren't able to get into the live chat here, you can throw them into my prop live stream a little bit later on tonight. That's all I've got for the round 2 stream. Best of luck, as I was saying. And yeah, got to get ready for the next live stream. So I'll see you guys a little bit later on tonight.